All right, let's go. The clatter of a knife against a plate at Nuova Villa Tamaro on Coney Island, April 15th, 1931. And across the table, Joe Masseria is reaching for the last piece of escarole on the platter between you. You're a soldier at the next table, and this is routine. Joe the boss eats here most days, and the bodyguards eat with him, and nobody at Scarpato's restaurant thinks twice about a long lunch that runs into the afternoon. What isn't routine is that Charlie Luciano excuses himself to the bathroom and doesn't come back to the table before the door opens. 4 men come through that door. The official names later given are Bugsy Siegel, Albert Anastasia, Joe Adonis, Vito Genovese, and Masseria's chair goes over backward. And the playing card found under his hand afterward is the ace of spades. And the smell in the room is gunpowder and coffee that's gone cold because nobody's touched it in 11 minutes. The newspapers will write 6 shots. The men in that kitchen will tell you it was closer to 20, fired by more than one gun, because nobody in that room was being economical that day. The official record, filed by the Brooklyn DA's office, lists the cause of death as homicide by person or persons unknown. No arrests made, no witnesses willing to identify anyone who left through the kitchen. What the men in the neighborhood reported for decades after was that Luciano had set the table himself, picked the restaurant, picked the day, and picked the moment he needed to be washing his hands. But the file was closed within the week, and the case was marked exactly the way the precinct wanted it marked, unsolved. No further action, and that should be the end of it. And yet no record anywhere explains who told Luciano which bathroom had a door that locked from the inside. By the time Masseria's body left Coney Island, the entire structure of the American Mafia had already changed shape, and nobody at that table had voted on it. You're not standing outside this anymore. You're the one who excused himself. Daily life inside the syndicate. The smell of a barbershop on Mulberry Street on a Tuesday morning in 1932. Hot towel steam and barbasol, and you're getting your weekly shave in the third chair from the window because that's your chair. It's always your chair. This is routine. You come in, you sit, the barber works, and the man 2 chairs down is reading the daily news and not talking to anyone. What isn't routine is that today the barber's hands are shaking slightly, just at the wrist, and he keeps glancing at the door instead of your collar. You're not the boss. You're the guy the boss trusts to carry an envelope 4 blocks without opening it, and Frank Costello, the man everyone on the street calls the Prime Minister, has told you more than once that the job isn't the gun, the job is the walk. You walk slow. You nod at the beat cop who nods back because the beat cop gets paid same as you on Friday, just from a different envelope. The numbers nobody says out loud are simple. A single Harlem policy bank could move more cash through a back room in one afternoon than the corner grocery made in a month, but nobody in this life talks in totals. They talk in the package, the number, the man uptown. The official histories, written later by federal investigators, describe a loosely affiliated criminal enterprise engaged in racketeering, extortion, and illegal gambling operations. What the men on Mulberry Street remembered was different. They remembered which barber owed which captain a favor, which beat cop's daughter made her confirmation that spring, which bookmaker's widow still got an envelope every Christmas for 9 years after he died of natural causes nobody investigated. The Seabury Commission would eventually file its findings on municipal corruption in language that reads like a tax audit, improper influence, undocumented income, irregular financial relationships between public officials and private interests, and the report names judges, not soldiers. It does not name the barber. And yet the barber's hands were still shaking when you left that morning, and nobody ever told you why. And 3 days later his chair was empty, and a different man was cutting hair in his place, and you never asked, because asking was the one thing the job didn't pay you to do. The next time you sit in that chair, you won't be getting a shave. Famous figures defining moment. Luciano's 1936 prosecution. The fluorescent hum of a courtroom on the fourth floor of the New York County Courthouse, June 1936, and you are lucky Luciano, and the seat under you is hardwood that's been sat in by better men than the ones testifying against you today. This is routine, or it should be. You've beaten charges before, you've got lawyers who know every judge's golf handicap. What isn't routine is the parade of women, over 100 witnesses, but you don't count them as 100, you count them one face at a time, each one walking past the defense table, testifying that you ran the prostitution rings of New York personally, by name, by hand. You're across the table now, not behind it. Thomas E. Dewey, the special prosecutor everyone underestimated, is standing closer to the jury box than the rules technically allow, and his voice doesn't rise, it just stays level, which is worse. The women's names are in the transcript: Cokie Flo Brown, Mildred Ballitzer, and what you notice sitting there is not the words. It's that they won't look at you, none of them, not once, and you've never had a room full of people refuse to look at you before. The official verdict: guilty on all 62 counts of compulsory prostitution, sentenced 30 to 50 years, the longest sentence ever handed down in New York State for the charge. What the men in your own organization said privately, then and for decades after, was that you didn't run the prostitution rackets at all, that it wasn't your business, that Dewey built his case on testimony purchased with promises of leniency to women who would say whatever kept them out of the women's house of detention. But the conviction stood, and the appeals failed, and the record closes there. Clean, 62 counts, 30 years. And yet no filing in that courthouse ever explains why a man who controlled labor rackets, the docks, the garment district, the loan operations that actually made his money, went to prison on the one charge his own people insisted wasn't his. You will spend the next 10 years finding out exactly how much that question is worth to the United States Navy. This is the room. You don't walk out of the same man who walked in. You're 3 men deep into this already, and it doesn't get gentler from here. Stay with it. The next room is the one where you stop watching and start carrying the gun yourself. If that's the version of this you came for, you're in the right place. Decision point before something irreversible: the contract on maranzano. The ring of a telephone in a hallway at 230 Park Avenue on September 10th, 1931, and you're standing in the corridor outside Salvatore Maranzano's office, the new boss of bosses, the man who won the war that killed Masseria 5 months ago. This is routine. Men come in and out of this office all day: accountants, real estate men, men who say they're real estate men. What isn't routine is that 4 of the men coming up in the elevator that morning aren't real estate men at all, and Maranzano doesn't know that yet, and you do. You're not in the room. You're the one who told Luciano that Maranzano had a list Genovese's name on it, your name on it, a contract out on every man who'd helped win the war Maranzano had just claimed credit for. The men who go up that elevator are reported, later, as Jewish gunmen Luciano borrowed specifically because nobody in Maranzano's crew would recognize their faces at the door. Inside that office, Maranzano is shot multiple times and stabbed besides, and the men come back down the same elevator they went up, calm, hats on, nodding to the same secretary they nodded to on the way in. The medical examiner's report lists 6 gunshot wounds and 4 stab wounds, manner of death homicide, weapon recovered. None. The men on the street called it something else. They called it the end of the castellammarese war in less time than it takes to ride an elevator 12 floors. 2 funeral homes on Mulberry Street had no available slots that week, because Maranzano wasn't the only one who didn't make it out of September. The official histories describe this as the consolidating event that created the commission, the governing body of the American Mafia, the structure that would run organized crime in this country for the next 60 years. What the record leaves out is that the men who carried it out were paid in cash, never initiated into the organization, and never spoken to again. And yet the phone call that sent them up that elevator came from you, standing in that hallway, holding a receiver that was still warm when you hung it up. The commission that exists because of that phone call would outlive every man who built it. The loan office, the price of being trusted. A back room above a tailor shop on Lafayette Street, late 1934, a single bulb hanging over a desk, and you're the man at that desk, and the ledger in front of you is the only thing in the room that matters. This is routine. A man comes in, asks for $200, you give him $200, you write a number in the ledger that has nothing to do with $200. What isn't routine this particular evening is that the man across the desk is someone you grew up with on Elizabeth Street, and he's not asking for money this time, he's asking for time. You and the man across from you both know what time costs in this room. Mayor Lansky structured these loan operations like a bank, 6% a week. No exceptions written into the ledger because exceptions weren't a financial category, they were a personal one, decided by you in this room under this bulb. You give him the extra week. You don't write it down. The cost of that decision isn't a number either. It's that now you owe an explanation to a captain who doesn't accept. I knew him growing up as collateral. The federal investigators who eventually subpoenaed ledgers like this one described the operation in their reports as a shylocking enterprise generating untraceable revenue through usurious lending practices targeting working-class borrowers. What the men in that back room remembered was simpler. Whose kid got fed that winter, whose debt got quietly absorbed into someone else's, whose name never appeared in any ledger at all because the captain decided some debts were worth more unpaid. The case files on Luciano-era loan operations, where they survived, list amounts, dates, named lenders. They do not list the week you gave away for free. But the ledger balanced by Friday, the way it always did, the way it had to. And yet somewhere in that balancing, a debt that should have broken a man on Elizabeth Street simply disappeared, absorbed into the only column in that room nobody was ever required to itemize. And that column, multiplied across every back room from the Bowery to Pelham Bay, is the real ledger nobody ever subpoenaed. You close the book. The light stays on a while longer than it should. Murder, Inc., and the death of Abe Reles. The cold air off Coney Island creaked through an open window on the 6th floor of the Half Moon Hotel, November 12, 1941, and you're a detective on guard duty outside room 623, and inside that room is the most protected witness in the history of the New York Police Department. This is routine. 6 officers rotate guard shifts on Abe Reles, the Murder, Inc., enforcer turned informant whose testimony has already sent half a dozen men to the electric chair, including Louis Lepke, Buchalter's own crew. What isn't routine is that at 6:30 in the morning, Reles is no longer in the room, and the knotted sheet tied to the radiator is hanging out the window, and Reles is on the roof of an extension 2 floors below, dead. You're the one who has to look down and see it first. The official explanation is that Reles tried to escape using a rope made of knotted sheets and fell, accidentally, while 6 police officers were posted to prevent exactly this. What the other guards reported in private, then and for the rest of their lives, was that the sheet was knotted wrong for a man trying to climb down it, and that Reles had nothing to gain by escaping into a city full of men who wanted him dead, and that District Attorney William O'Dwyer's case against Albert Anastasia for the murder of Reles's own associates collapsed the same week Reles hit the pavement. The medical examiner ruled it accidental death. The police department's internal investigation found no evidence of foul play, and the case was closed. The press at the time gave Reles a new name, one that stuck for the next 80 years, the canary who could sing but couldn't fly. But the official ruling stands in the record exactly as written, accidental, unattended, no charges filed. And yet no report anywhere explains how a sheet rope falls 2 stories short of the ground. A witness was supposedly climbing down. On the one night his testimony was about to name names that never got named in open court. Anastasia walked. The case against him died on that rooftop with reles, and it never came back. You're the one standing guard. You're the one who has to write the report. You've been outside the door, across the table, on the phone, on the roof. From here it doesn't loosen its grip, it tightens. The next stretch is the one where the wall's actually close, where the empire you've been living inside starts paying its bill. Keep going. Luciano's deportation and the Navy deal. The deck of the SS Laura Keene, February 1946, salt wind cutting through your coat, and you are lucky Luciano, watching the Brooklyn waterfront recede for what everyone on this dock has already decided is the last time. This is routine, in the sense that deportations happen. Men get sent back to where they came from. What isn't routine is that you're being deported as a hero of sorts, your sentence commuted by Governor Thomas Dewey, the same Dewey who put you away for 30 to 50 years a decade earlier, for services rendered to the United States Navy during the war. You're the man at the center of Operation Underworld, and what you did, according to the men who were actually in the rooms with you, was use your influence over the New York waterfront to prevent Nazi sabotage and labor unrest on the docks, and later to help naval intelligence make contact with Sicilian organized crime figures ahead of the Allied invasion of Sicily in 1943. 3,000 miles of American coastline, patrolled by longshoremen who answered to men who answered to you, and not one significant act of dockside sabotage during the entire war. The official record, when the New York State Commissioner of Correction reviewed your commutation, cites meritorious service to this state and nation in time of war, in language deliberately thin on specifics, because the Navy never wanted its own records to confirm exactly what services were rendered or by whom. What the men who served alongside naval intelligence said afterward, in oral histories taken decades later, was that the deal was real, that Luciano's name opened doors in Sicily and Palermo that no American officer could have opened alone, and that the United States government had, in effect, paroled a convicted trafficker in exchange for help winning a war. The commutation order is 4 paragraphs long. It does not mention Sicily. It does not mention the docks. It mentions good conduct and service to country and leaves the rest to men who were sworn, many of them, never to discuss it. And yet you are standing on this deck because of rooms nobody can produce a transcript for, because of conversations that happened between a prisoner and naval officers in a place officially described only as a meeting. The war that ends when this ship docks in Naples is the only war you ever fought that the government will admit you helped win, and it admits it in 4 paragraphs, and it never says your name above a whisper again. You will spend the rest of your life in Italy, watching America from the wrong side of the water you just crossed. The moment Genovese decides to move against Luciano. A private dining room in a restaurant outside Naples, 1957, the kind of place where the waiter knows to bring the wine and then disappear, and you're sitting across from Vito Genovese, who has flown a long way to have this particular conversation in person. This is routine. Old friends from the same neighborhood, sharing a meal, talking about the old days on Mulberry Street the way exiled men always do. What isn't routine is that Genovese isn't here as a friend. He's here to find out whether you still have enough reach in New York to be a problem for what he's planning, and you both know it, and neither of you says it out loud. You're across the table from him now, the way Masseria once sat across a table from a man who'd already decided his fate. You watch Genovese's hands more than his face, because hands tell you things faces are trained not to. He asks about your health. He asks about your finances. He's not asking out of friendship. He's measuring how much of the old empire still answers when your name is mentioned. Because within 2 years Genovese will move on Albert Anastasia, have him killed in a barbershop chair on 55th Street, and seize control of a commission seat that Luciano, in exile, can no longer contest from 3,000 miles away. The official narrative, built later by federal investigators tracking the Appalachian Conference and the Commission's internal reshuffling, describes this period as a power consolidation following the deportation of Charles Luciano, language that treats the transfer of an empire like a corporate succession plan. What men who knew both of you said afterward was that this dinner was Genovese making sure the old king was harmless before he killed the new one standing in his way. The dinner ends. Genovese pays. He always paid in public because it cost him nothing.